The final argument is the teleological argument. This is the worst of the three arguments in my opinion. It is the least compelling. Most people, though, would tend to see this as the most persuasive, or at least the least unpersuasive. Kant and Hume, whose criticisms of 3 plus people often fall back on, found this argument the best of the three. The teleological argument moves from some sort of design in the world to some sort of a designer. That designer, it is said, is God. There are many there are many different putative designs which have been appealed to in the course of arguing teleologically. So teleological arguments are much broader than appeal to biological design and or the ID movement. And I think it is undeniable by all sane men that there is design in our world, if by design all we mean is that there are what could be called means, and corresponding to these what could be called ends. The fertilization of the egg by the sperm is the means, and the offspring is the end, for example. This should be non-controversial. What is controversial, though, is how we are to understand this design. The theist wants to say that the design is the result of God, who therefore would exist. And the skeptic wants to say that the design arose in a naturalistic way by, apparently, blind chance. The question is, which is the more plausible? Is it more plausible that what looks designed really is design? Or that it is only apparent design, apparent intelligent design, that it only appears to be intelligently designed? It seems to me that a good prima facie case could be made that things probably are as they appear to be. But if things look one way but turn out to be the exact opposite of what they appear to be, why, we would need good reason to suppose that this is probably the case. Let's get more precise now. Some of the apparent design we see is with respect to the biological world. Animals and plants seem to be intelligently designed by a God. How could this be denied? Well, of course, by appeal to evolution. Neo-Darwinian forces, we are told, are responsible for giving the appearance in biological life of intelligent design. Outside of the biological world, all, or at least a very large percentage of apparent design, is with respect to the laws of nature. Gravity makes the planets by coalescing dust together, interstellar dust, and it keeps the planets in systemic orbits. In our own solar system, for example. Science presently has no answer for why there is non-biological apparent design, so this latter sort of design could be the result of a divine intelligence, and there is no good materialistic alternative available to the atheist at present. But even in the biological realm, the situation for the religious believer is not so bad as Darwin makes it appear. After all, we can't rule out the existence of God a priori without begging the question against the teleological argument. Moreover, if God exists, then I see no reason why he could not have used evolution as a tool for his designs. Human architects use computers and blueprints as tools, so maybe God does exist and he used genes and natural selection as tools. Evolution is thus not a successful defeater of divine design. The atheist could be reflecting on the data of science with blinders on, being too focused on one level of design so that he or she is ignoring a deeper level of design. That's a possibility. Some forms of the teleological argument may not give absolute mathematical proof of the existence of God, but that does not mean that they don't make the existence of God more plausible than not. That is, teleological arguments are at least good enough to raise the probability of God's existence to 51%. So it's a good argument. What is puzzling at this point is that the atheist may perhaps admit the argument itself, the teleological argument, is sound, but go on to draw undesirable inferences from the conclusion. How do we know that the designer is the God of the Bible? How do we know there weren't a committee of designers? How do we know the designer did not die immediately after his work was completed? These are all interesting theological questions, but they are totally irrelevant to the teleological argument. The only thing intended to be said by the teleological argument is that some sort of deity exists. Whether or not this deity is necessarily omnipotent, for example, does not change the fact established by the argument that a God exists, or at least more likely exists than not. God as cosmic designer is real. That's it. That's all the teleological argument is trying to say. And this is enough to establish that atheism is false, regardless of any possible corollaries a skeptic may wish to draw out of the initial conclusion. Before concluding what I had to say about the teleological argument, I have to backtrack a little bit to address the issue, however briefly, of so-called bad design. The presence of bad design in the world, if actual, does not cancel out the simultaneous presence of good design, so putative bad design is not a successful defeater of teleological arguments. That's all I want to say about putative bad design. In short, finally, the teleological argument is sound, and atheist criticisms of it are thoroughly unsuccessful. Conclusion. From everything that's been said, I think it's quite clear that the standard objections to the traditional theistic proofs are not very good. Whether the criticism is coming from Hume, or Kant, or Michael Martin, or even Das American Atheist, it makes no difference. The case against the case for theism is exceedingly poor. Hence, the case for theism remains ridiculously strong. And this is not a personal attack on any unbelievers, it is merely an observation of the facts. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe if you are so inclined. Shalom out.